Rising concerns tonight that communist China may sell American technology to rogue regimes in both Iran and Syria. This comes after an investigation by a leading arms control group. That group finding that some Chinese companies with access to key American technology also have close ties to China's military. Christine Romans has our report.
Since the massacre at Tiananmen Square, it has been illegal to sell American military technology to China. Other so-called dual-use technology requires a license from the Commerce Department to ensure legitimate commercial exports don't help China's military. The Commerce Department recently allowed 5 Chinese companies a fast track around the usual certification process. But a new report by arms control advocate the Wisconsin Project finds 2 of the companies have ties to China's military.
We're just increasing the risk that our technology is going to help either China increase its military capability, or it's going to find its way into the hands of the Syrians or the Iranians.
According to the report, the new program, as it's being implemented, gives Chinese military parent companies the ability to gain access without an export license to virtually unlimited quantities of American products in categories that have long been restricted because of their potential military use. The Commerce Department hailed the program as a balance between national security and increased trade.
Each of the companies, the 5 companies that were granted VU status, including the one you just mentioned, was unanimously approved by the U.S. government, the interagency, including the Department of State, the Department of Defense, with support from the intelligence community.
He called the 5 companies trusted customers.
By assuming that there are so-called trustworthy companies in China is based upon a complete ignorance of how the Chinese do business internally and how they mix their civilian and military economies, so they're basically indistinguishable from each other.
Even as some Chinese companies are no longer required to get export licenses, the overall list of restricted exports is growing.
If you ask my members, which are large multinational companies that make and export these things, they're unhappy because they think that the regulation is being tightened.
In fact, he'd like to see more Chinese companies allowed fast-track status. But the Wisconsin Project wants the Commerce Department to immediately suspend this fast track for certain Chinese companies, and it wants a full review before any more companies are added to the list. The concern that American technology could be used against the United States in any military conflict with China, Lou.
This is precisely what we've been warning about on this broadcast for literally years here. It is one of the things that the U.S. Economic Review Commission has been working very hard and studying and bringing to the attention of the American people. Why in the world, why is this administration so absolutely indifferent to these concerns?
Some observers say that it's because they are increasing the number of things that have to be export controlled and then allowing a backdoor to appease the Chinese and multinational companies in this country who want to sell more high technology to China regardless.
There is, in my judgment, no better example of the issue of elitism and indifference to the welfare of the American people on the part of this administration than this exact issue. Because they're really saying that it doesn't matter what laws you passed, it doesn't matter what your national values and the national interests are. We're going to decide, and in this case, as on so many issues, whether it's illegal immigration, whether it's border security, outsourcing, offshoring your production, that simply we're so wise that we will make these judgments, and there won't be transparency and there won't be straightforwardness. This administration, people talk about George Bush's legacy. His legacy will be deceit, dishonesty, and in my judgment, absolutely disregard for the national interest and for the common good. And that's not the kind of legacy one would think that even this president would want to have. Any possibility that there will be a change in the approach?
The Commerce Department says if there's any derogatory information about any of these companies, they will be reevaluated.
Well, here's some derogatory information about the Commerce Department, and hopefully they'll start evaluating the way they do business, because they're there to serve the American people, not corporate America. Christine, thanks very much. Christine Romans. Well, a deal that could give communist China American military secrets could face tougher scrutiny for a change by the federal government. The Financial Times reporting that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, CFIUS, is extending its investigation into a proposed buyout of 3Com by Bain Capital and a Chinese corporation with ties to Beijing's military. The deal, worth more than $2 billion. The committee reportedly extending the investigation by 45 days. 3Com supplying technology, of course, to our Defense Department. Time now for some of your thoughts. Jim in New Hampshire said, "Dear Lou, I've been watching your show for 2 years, and every day I'm more impressed with your insight, tenacity, and resolve to fight for and protect the interests of the backbone of our country, the middle class. Your exposure of wasteful government programs, dangerous lapses in our national security, and the ongoing tragedy in Iraq and Afghanistan gives us all a glimmer of hope that we can eventually end this insanity. Jim in Colorado said, I just finished reading Independence Day and agree totally with it. My question is, if all the presidential candidates are still willing to cave in to special interest, elitist philosophy, how do we find someone who will represent us? Thanks for your hard work. Keep it up, and you're being joined by more of us each day. Thank you, and yes, more and more people are signing up as independents. And by the way, every single candidate running for their party's presidential nomination is starting to take notice. Alan in Wisconsin said, Lou, may you and your staff have a very happy new year and go independents. Yes, and happy new year to all of you. We'll have more of your thoughts here later in the broadcast. Each of you whose email is read here receives a copy of my new book, Independence Day, Awakening the American Spirit. It's the book that corporate America, the Democratic Party, and the Republican parties certainly don't want you to read. Coming up next, the Iowa caucuses. Just 24 hours away, we'll have more from the campaign trail. That means cold, icy, windy Iowa. And rising pressure on Senator Hillary Clinton. Should she have just skipped Iowa? We'll hear from Carl Bernstein and our distinguished panel of political analysts, and a disturbing new report showing this nation's factory workers facing a bleak future. And it may be too late to turn things around, in the minds at least of some. We'll examine that in our report coming up next. Stay with us.